And David?
Thanks very much, Steve. Yes, my name is David Toomey. I'm the CEO and founder of Deltine Motel Fund. So it's actually private equity, not private credit. There's a bit of a distinction here. My background is in private equity investment management in Europe and in Australia, in venture capital and in private equity. And funnily enough, I found the best returns in Australia in commercial property in the regions, which is why we're going after motel funds. It's not glamorous, but it's very high yielding. We seek double-digit returns, property-backed returns, and that's what we're focusing on. Steve, I really love what Stephanie's doing because, as you know, the company I worked for previously, Tritium, we were a growth company in Australia and not profitable, and we were really assisted with debt as a growing, unprofitable company. We'd never thought, we did about 10 rounds of equity raising, we never thought we could borrow debt in a situation where we're unprofitable, but given our revenue was so strong, we had global markets and we had a leadership position in our market. We used debt very successfully. We ended up listing on the Nasdaq and had at the end of it $160 million US dollars worth of debt. So it can be very powerful the way Stephanie's describing it. Well done.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Good breakdown. And David, over to you. I was speaking with a fund manager, and they were mentioned, and it was you actually don't know I'm going to say this. I was speaking with a fund manager, and he mentioned that they were managing previously, multi-billions of dollars worth of assets in property, and they scoured the entire Australian landscape trying to understand where they could actually get their best returns in Australian property, and where they landed up was in motels. So, I suppose my question for you is, you've obviously had a transition. You've gone from many different sectors. What led you to this area of sort of targeting motels for opportunity?
Yeah, it's very simple, Steve. Return and low risk. I guess, and I don't say this to big note myself, but I have worked in private equity in Europe, in venture capital, doing deals in London and Wall Street. We've listed a venture company on the Nasdaq. I've been the chief investment officer of a VC firm that targeted climate tech. But I thought, where do I want to put my money? I've travelled the world, I've seen lots of sectors and lots of returns. And the returns we were targeting when I was in Europe was for large buyouts and mega buyouts was between 16 and 18%. And for venture, it was between 25 and 28%. That was a global benchmark for upper quartile funds that we were investing in. But if you look in Australia and you look property backed, we found that in motels, we can get a 20% per annum return over 5 years in a property-backed commercial asset. And so you ask yourself, well, why is that the case? Well, it's just an under-the-radar segment. I've heard an institution literally say this a couple of months ago, well, if it's not within an hour of a capital city airport, we're not interested. Well, that's when we start getting interested, because that's where the gems are. That's under-the-radar stuff, deals between 5 and 15 million, too small for institutions, too large for families. And that's where we've found the best returns. So we're buying motels at between 10 and 12% yield, so we can provide our investors with that income yield. And then the upsides from consolidating the market, operational improvements, and the upside when we put 50 of these together, you get a real kick at the end with the upside equity when you're listing a $500 million fund or selling a $500 million fund as opposed to a single asset. It's more diverse, and therefore you get a much better valuation. So the returns are great, as good as I've seen it anywhere, and it's a great property in a great location. When you go into a regional town as Dubbo or Seymour or Coffs Harbour or Orange or Bundaberg, what's on the centre of town in the main road? It's a motel, and they're very busy, and there's a lot of corporates staying there, a lot of activity in our regions. In fact, over 650 billion of our Australia's GDP comes from the regions. There's a lot of agriculture, mining, logistics, education, healthcare going on in our regions that you might not realise, and all of this has got to be serviced with a service sector like accommodation.
Thanks, David. And David, you mentioned about sort of going into regional areas, and there's obviously been a significant move for a lot of people moving outside of sort of CBD, sort of areas, or within that 1 hour you're talking about, and moving into regional areas. What do you see as the sort of role of sort of what you're doing with sort of Deltine and other sort of private capital providers, and the role that they can assist with sort of regional economic development?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just not to underestimate the regions. There's an enormous amount of goods coming out of the regions, whether it's agriculture or mining.
Lockyer Valley getting a plug there.
No, it's huge. So I mean, there is an enormous amount of services that's required, and the government's investing a lot in our regions with infrastructure. There's often airports, roads, rail, ports, moving the goods and services around, but moving the people around. As I said, there's healthcare and there's education. There's a lot of services to provide to a lot of people, and as you're saying, it's becoming more attractive. The leaf tree change or the seaside change, it's a very attractive places to live. So, that then breeds economic activity and breeds growth. It breeds housing. It breeds more rates for the local council who can in turn then invest that into the local community. And so when all of this activity is increasing, the accommodation sector is good, and that's the way we see it. We're investing in Tamworth, some service departments there. 22 service departments is the current deal that we've got at the moment. And high yield, but very high occupancy, and it's full of nurses and engineers and construction workers and lawyers and magistrates coming into the town to provide services. And we're not going after the glamour of the Gold Coast Strip or Cairns or Jindabyne, where it's very fluctuating and seasonal with tourism. We're going after steady growth areas, providing these defensive services to the local communities.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. And final question to all three of you in our final 3.5 minutes is that you guys look at a lot, and you've got your own investment theses, you've got your own you've got your own focus where your fund is focused on, and you're relentlessly consuming information, speaking to people, thinking about sort of where everything is going. So my final question is going to be, over the next 3 to 5 years, what are you most bullish on for your specific area? It could be a sector. For you, Stephanie, Chris, I'll leave that open for you, and same with you, David. But what do you think in the next 3 to 5 years, where do you think that real alpha is? What are you most bullish on that you think has the greatest opportunity in that 3 to 5 year time frame in what you're seeing?
Thanks, Steve. And as Warren Buffett said, be brave when others are fearful. And sometimes that's not about predicting the future. It's just finding something that's unloved, which is obviously what we've done. But looking at the AI side of that, to give you another anecdote about AI and how powerful that is, even in the motel sector, we'll be using that extensively for bookings, automated bookings into our system automatically instead of having somebody replying to emails. AI can do that for us, but also customer service. Having chat bots call our customers as they leave the property and ask how their stay was, ask if they have any feedback for us, ask if that we can do anything better next time. And you might cringe at getting a call from a computer, but if you actually experienced this recently, it's so close to talking to a human. It's unbelievable. It's uncanny. The only difference you can detect is a slight 3/4 of a second pause before they speak again, processing, but what they're saying and how they're saying it, and the personality is just incredible. So we see using that in our customer experience and just getting that feedback and making sure our guests are well looked after. So AI is an obvious one, of course.
Brilliant. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our time. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, David.
Thank you.